In less than 80 years, the Mongols went from being a small, tribal society living in tents in the Mongolian steppe to ruling over the largest contiguous land empire in history. Stretching from the Pacific Ocean all the way to Eastern Europe, the Mongols were nomadic people who lived by raising livestock and hunting. They were fierce horsemen from childhood and preferred to live in tents rather than build permanent settlements. This is why they're often considered to be nomadic. The Mongols had a reputation for being bloodthirsty even before Genghis Khan came around. One particularly brutal tradition of theirs was the blood-drinking ritual. The most popular theory suggests that this practice started with the Karaite people, one of the tribes that eventually merged into the Mongol Empire. According to this view, the Karaites adopted the blood-drinking custom after their defeat at the hands of the Taijut clan, another group of Mongols. To take revenge, they attacked a Taijut wedding party, kidnapped a beautiful woman named Hodula, and took her back to their camp. There they shackled her to a post and forced her to watch as they performed a human sacrifice. After they cut the victim open, Hodula screamed, "Fill my mouth with blood!" And so the Karaite men dipped their bread in the sacrificial blood and ate it. Then they brought the filled bread to the bride and groom, which is when the Mongols realized the Karaite had kidnapped the wrong people. But by then it was too late. The bride and groom ate the bloody bread, and ever since that day every Mongol bride and groom had to dip their bread in blood at their weddings. Genghis Khan wasn't fond of this tradition and actually banned it for a while, but it made a comeback in the 13th century and remained popular until the empire's decline. Fun fact, the word Genghis supposedly means ocean or righteous in Mongolian, while Khan is a title meaning ruler. So his full name basically means ocean ruler. Genghis Khan was born around 1160 AD near Lake Kentai, which is now in Mongolia, though some scholars believe he may have been born in what is now western China. His birth story sounds like something out of Greek mythology. You see, according to legend, Genghis's father, Yasuge, dreamed that his wife would give birth to a boy who would unite all the Mongols under one banner. On the night of his son's birth, a blood clot came out of his wife instead of the placenta. He took this to mean that the prophecy would not come true. However, a wise old shaman reassured him, saying that it was just an early sign of his son's future greatness. Yubai was still skeptical, but soon enough, Genghis proved himself to be a capable leader. At age 9, he led his father's army to victory against enemies who had stolen some of his tribe's mores. A few years later, he married a girl from a rival tribe named Port, but she was soon kidnapped by the Tatars. Genghis assembled a band of volunteers and set off to rescue her, and he successfully managed to do so. When he returned home, his followers proclaimed him as their leader, and thus the Mongol Empire was born. In 1206, Genghis held a Kurultai, a traditional assembly of Mongol leaders, and was officially proclaimed the first great Khan of the Mongols. Soon after, he set his sights on uniting the nomadic tribes of northern Asia under his banner. The Mongols often employed scorched earth tactics, burning the villages of their enemies so that they wouldn't have anywhere to go during the winter, but Genghis wasn't opposed to granting amnesty to those who surrendered. He was also very smart about choosing who to ally with. For example, he allied with a man named Turul, who was a shaman and the leader of a powerful clan of sorcerers. As a result, Genghis had access to a highly effective military force composed of 40,000 cavalrymen and 20,000 infantrymen. With numbers like that, Genghis had no trouble defeating his enemies. His first major victory came at the Battle of the Kal River in 1201. Where he defeated the Quraysh Empire and opened up trade along the Silk Road. Next, he crushed the Kara-Khitai, an empire centered in what is today eastern Uzbekistan and western China. In 1207, he defeated the Western He dynasty, which controlled part of modern-day China, and continued to expand northward into Siberia. By the end of 1209, he ruled over almost all of modern-day Mongolia and large parts of northern China. He also kept expanding eastward, conquering lands all the way to the Pacific Ocean at its greatest extent. The Mongol Empire stretched over 6 million square miles. To put that number in perspective, if the United States were the same size, it would fit inside the Mongol Empire 2 times. But Genghis didn't stop there. He also conquered lands to the west, including parts of Central Asia and the Middle East. Although Genghis had a reputation for being ruthless, he wasn't a religious fanatic like many other conquerors throughout history. He respected the customs of the people he conquered and generally allowed them to keep their religion. Even though he himself followed Tengriism, a Central Asian religion based on shamanism, animism, and a supreme sky god. In 1218, Genghis turned his attention toward the Song dynasty in China. At the time, the Song were the dominant power in the region and ruled over a wealthy and technologically advanced empire. But the Mongols were superior horsemen and they had gunpowder weapons. The Mongols also used psychological warfare to their advantage, sending intimidating letters to the cities they besieged. For example, after the Mongols laid siege to the city of Heian, they sent the following letter to its ruler. From Genghis Khan, the invincible, the all-conquering, the pacifier of the whole world, the ruler of the four seas, the heaven-appointed master of all under the sun and moon. Submit, and you shall live. Resist, and you shall die. Most of the cities simply ignored these letters, but that wasn't always the case. In fact, some cities chose to submit peacefully just to avoid having to deal with the Mongols. Despite the Mongols' victories in battle, Genghis didn't really know how to administer the territories he conquered. He relied on local officials to do most of the work. Unfortunately, those officials often abused their authority and exploited the people they were supposed to be helping. When Genghis learned of this, he punished them severely. For example, he executed 2 of his generals, Dorb and Jelm, for extorting money from merchants passing through the Mongol Empire. As the Mongols conquered more and more land, they needed a way to manage the influx of new subjects. So, Genghis created a civil service that oversaw taxes, public works, law enforcement, and other aspects of government. He also created a postal system, which helped spread news and ideas throughout the empire. Genghis Khan was also very open-minded and enjoyed learning about different cultures. His wife, Sorgatani, was a former slave who became one of the most powerful women in history. She was a Christian convert and played a big role in administering the empire. She also founded schools and encouraged education among the Mongol nobility. Unfortunately, Genghis didn't live to see much of this because he died in 1227, according to legend. He fell off a horse while hunting and suffered a serious injury. No one knows exactly how he died, though some historians believe he might have been killed by an arrow. Genghis was succeeded by his son Ogday, who finished the conquest of northern China and launched the first Mongol invasion of Europe. Ogday was a shrewd leader who surrounded himself with advisors from different backgrounds. He also established the capital of the empire in Karakorum, located in present-day Mongolia. In 1241, Ogeday's brother Batu led a Mongol force of 40,000 to 80,000 men into Poland. The Mongols weren't prepared for European castles, so they focused on pillaging across the countryside. The Polish army attempted to stop them, but they lost badly at the Battle of the Kalka River. Soon the Mongols were deep in European territory, but they weren't able to capture any major cities. The reason for this is because the Mongols preferred to besiege cities instead of storming them. But since they didn't have the proper equipment to lay siege to well-built European castles, they mostly bypassed them and headed toward open areas where they could easily defeat the locals. In 1248, Pope Innocent IV declared a crusade against the Mongols. It was called the Disastrous Crusade because the Crusaders were almost immediately annihilated by the Mongols. By the 1250s, the Mongols had expanded as far west as modern-day Hungary and Austria. But Beta decided to call off further expansion after hearing that his brother Monkey had become the new Great Khan. You see, Beta had actually supported Mogul Khan's rise to power in exchange for being named the ruler of the western part of the empire. However, Monkey wanted to reunite the empire under one ruler and refused to acknowledge Batu's authority. Eventually, the brothers reconciled, and in 1259, Monkey sent his brother Hilagu to conquer the Middle East. While Hilagu was doing this, Batu's grandson Berk converted to Islam and renamed himself Muhammad Khan. Under his rule, the Golden Horde became a fully fledged Muslim state. Meanwhile, in China, Kublai Khan rose to power and established the Yuan dynasty. He conquered the Song dynasty in 1279 and completed the conquest of China. Unlike his ancestors, Kublai wasn't interested in expanding the empire. Instead, he focused on consolidating the ones they already had and improving trade relations with neighboring states. Kublai also founded a new capital city in Beijing and promoted cultural and scientific advances. During his reign, Marco Polo arrived in the empire and served in the imperial court. He's best known for his book, The Travels of Marco Polo, which helped Europeans learn about the riches of the East. In 1294, Kublai granted him the noble title of Most Excellent and Wise Lord. Unfortunately, the Mongol Empire didn't last forever. After Kublai's death in 1294, the empire fell into civil war. Eventually, the various Mongol kingdoms broke away and became independent states. By the 14th century, the once mighty Mongol Empire was gone. But its legacy lived on in the form of cultural exchanges and new technologies. The Mongols facilitated the spread of gunpowder, the magnetic compass, and paper money throughout Asia and Europe. They also helped introduce new crops such as rice, cotton, and citrus fruits to different parts of the world. The Mongol Empire is often seen as one of the most significant turning points in history. It's hard to imagine how Europe and Asia would have developed without the cultural and technological advancements brought on by the Mongols. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned for more epic stories. Thanks for watching.